Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst, and today we're going to look at some controversial remarks made by broadcaster Ben Shapiro about retirement. And Ben Shapiro made some statements that caused a lot of people to turn their heads and scratch their head and actually squint their eyes, because it sounded like it was something unbelievable that he said, but actually what he said was quite reasonable. And what he basically said was most people should not be retiring at age 65. And he also said that most people will not be able to retire, the younger generation specifically, with the current Social Security system in the United States. So if they're counting on retiring at 65, and you're a younger generation person, that probably won't happen, and it's not a good retirement age to retire anyway. And I would like to raise the whole question, is the whole idea of, quote, retirement as it's popularly formulated, is that even a biblical concept, and is that even a Christian concept? So we'll get into it today, but let's first tackle what Ben Shapiro talked about, because he started the conversation, and then we can launch on to other topics related to retirement from his initial podcast. So let's hear what he had to say and what was the controversy.
So yesterday, I apparently blew up the internet. I blew up the internet because of something that I said on this show. What exactly did I say that blew up the internet? Well, I touched the political third rail. I talked about Social Security. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's so spicy about Social Security? And I will admit, I was thinking the same thing, because there's a few simple facts of the matter with regard to Social Security. One, we don't have the money for it, and it's a Ponzi scheme. And two,
that is correct. We don't have the money to sustain the current Social Security system. And this is not just speculation. This is not just pessimism. This is not just rumor or gossip among citizens of our nation. This is coming right from the source. The Social Security Administration says that by the year 2033 to 2035, there will not be enough money to pay full benefits of people in retirement. So in other words, they're saying it will have to be cut by around 25% in order to sustain it just for the next, after that, say 5 or 10 years. And who knows what's going to happen after the 5 or 10 years are over. But that is coming from the Social Security Administration. So this is very discouraging. This is very pessimistic, especially people over 40, I'd say, who are looking to not, you might say, retire, but actually be able to draw upon the money that they put in the system over 4 or 5 decades. So we've all been putting money into the Social Security system, and we're all counting on that retirement or that pension to be there because we've put into it. But what the reality is that the government, that money is not anywhere specifically just sitting there, accruing interest. That money has already been spent in the federal budget, and in order to pay out that money, the government is essentially having to pay back the Social Security Administration, which has loaned this money out to the general government budget in the form of bonds. So in order to pay that money back to the Social Security Administration, the government will have to take on greater debt. And so that debt cannot be sustained. And so by the year 2033, that's only maybe 7 or 8 years from now, the Social Security Trust Fund will have to be cut, as far as payouts go, by about 25%. That's what they're saying officially. You can look on their website and they will tell you that. So Ben Shapiro is exactly right. Social Security, the system as we know it, has to be reformed or modified. Something has to change because we can't continue on the path we're heading down to now. So what's his second point?
with regard to sort of the personal decision to retire, very often when people retire, they're making a bad decision. This is what I said. I want to play you the clip of what I said yesterday, and then I want to discuss why exactly this was so controversial. And I think it goes deep to the root of something that's happened on both the right and the left, which is this weird idea that work is somehow demeaning and bad and terrible, and that somehow purpose and fulfillment don't come from work and don't come from church and don't come from family. So where do they come from? That's a broader argument. We'll get to that in a moment. I want to play you this clip because this apparently set 1,000 hearts aflutter. And let's be real about this. It's insane that we haven't raised the retirement age in the United States. It's totally crazy. Joe Biden, if that were the case, Joe Biden should not be running for president. Hey, Joe Biden is 81 years old. The retirement age in the United States at which you start to receive Social Security and you are eligible for Medicare is 65. Joe Biden has technically been eligible for Social Security and Medicare for 16 years, and he wants to continue in office until he is 86, which is 19 years past when he would be eligible for retirement. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem.
Okay, so this is one of his big controversial points that he made. Aside from the whole government system of Social Security, which we need to reform, there's no question about that. But this issue of saying that a person should retire at age 65 and then millions and millions and millions of senior citizens are looking forward to the day when they reach 65 or 66 or 67. Now it's 67 for those born in the 1960s beyond. So they're looking forward to the day they turn 67 and then they can, quote, retire. And he's saying that's a crazy idea because unless you can't work, unless you can't move about, and unless you have an infirmity or a sickness or an illness, you should not be talking in terms of, quote, retirement. Now, as a Christian, I look upon that statement and I actually can say amen. Now, we have to unpack what you mean by retirement. I think the term retirement is a bad term because it carries all kinds of baggage. For some people, when they think of, quote, retirement, they think of kicking back, doing nothing, basically lounging around, goofing off, having fun all the time, eating out all the time, doing what you couldn't do all your life, and now you have time to play. And a lot of retirees, their vision of retirement is to go to Florida and just live it up down there and do whatever they want to do, travel across the country in a motorhome, travel, basically do play activity all the time, full-time play, and forget about all kinds of productive work. Many retirees want to sell their home. They want to downscale so they don't have to do any yard work. They don't have to do any car maintenance. They don't have to do any kind of repair on their home or wherever they live. They want to basically get rid of all earthly responsibilities so no one is pressuring them. They want to make it so it's essentially a carefree life and live that way for the next 20, 25 years until they die. And when you look in the Bible, when you look in the New Testament, especially the Christian vision of life, there is nothing that talks about waiting to a certain set time in your older years to just basically goof off and play and have recreation as your only activity and doing what you want to do and spending on yourself and not having any kind of responsibilities in society, not really doing much with civic society and churches, church groups, or anything. It's just basically you, yourself, and concentrating on what you want to do in a very selfish way. Now, you know, a lot of retirees don't think of it that way, but if you look at their activities in, quote, retirement years, much of it is very self-centered. And so we have to question that whole modern concept of retiring. This is a fairly modern concept because rather recently, people were more living in farming communities and they couldn't just plop down in the living room on the couch and sit around all day and do nothing. They still had activities that they had to do on the farm, and they still had to get up in the morning, and oftentimes they still had to milk the cows and feed the chickens and do all kinds of activities. So maybe they weren't working outside of the home, but seniors still had to do a lot of meaningful activity, and it gave their life meaning and purpose. And that's what Ben Shapiro is saying, that this whole idea that there's a set age, especially a set age like 65 or 67, whenever you get Social Security, this idea that that is the age where you just stop working, stop being accountable or responsible to anybody else, and just focus on you and goofing off and having fun all day long and sleeping in till noon if you want to, and then traveling here and there and just basically spending a carefree life. That is not a biblical concept, and Ben Shapiro is onto something here, and I think churches don't talk about this enough, and we need to talk about it, because the modern idea of there's a set age where you have to stop working, drastically stop all responsibilities, and basically make this dramatic lifestyle change is nowhere found in the Bible. It's nothing. So it's an invention. So is that a good invention or not? Let's hear what Ben has to say more.
Everybody that I know who is elderly, who has retired, is dead within 5 years. And if you talk,
and that is a real problem, because, and you see this, and you can see this in many instances where a person's been working for a company for 20, 30, 40 years, and they retire, and they trade in their 40-hour-a-week job with all kinds of responsibilities, and basically come home to a home that's quiet, and they don't have anything to do. And so they have to come up with things to do, and they have to try to invent things to do. And that whole process is totally unnecessary. And I think it's just common sense that if you're working 40 hours and you're still reasonably healthy and you still have reasonable energy, you should not plan on going from a 40-hour work week to 0 and have nothing planned to do. You should, at a minimal, think in terms of maybe scaling back to a part-time job or part-time activities, or have something lined up, whether it could be a charitable organization or helping at your church or doing something meaningful and significant, but just to drop your daily schedule and radically change at a certain set time of age, that's crazy, and it doesn't make sense, and it often leads to depression in the person. It often leads to poor health outcomes, and then eventually it leads to an early death because they just don't have any purpose. They haven't found or invented a purpose for their lives now that they don't have to work. And before, work was a major part of their life, and they don't have anything to do, and they get bored, and they just die of neglect and boredom and other problems like depression and mental illness and that kind of thing. So he's right. It's not healthy to do what we have been taught to do for the last few decades.
talk to people who are elderly and they lose their purpose in life by losing their job and they stop working, things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. But put all of that aside. Okay, so those are two arguments, right? So those are two arguments. One is we have to raise the retirement age. And two is that as a general rule, it is not a good personal decision for people to retire early. And I say even right there, unless we are talking about people who suffer a physical or mental malady as a result of continued work. So for example, you're a bricklayer and now you're 65 years old and your back is gone. Obviously, you're going to want to retire from being a bricklayer because you have a physical malady, which I literally said on the show yesterday and everybody is ignoring. But let's go through these.
Yes, and that is a good point. If you have had a high physical, stressful job for decade after decade, and you've beaten up your body to the point, if you're a construction worker, if you are, like he said, a bricklayer, if you're someone who has injured your back over the many years, or you have abused your body in some kind of work, physical labor work, or it could be even an office situation where you've gotten carpal tunnel syndrome and you have arthritis all over the place. If you are physically infirmed, then yes, definitely you should not feel in all guilty about just up and quitting. But really, you have to rethink that too, because there are things that seniors can do and should do to keep their meaning and purpose and do significant things and feel like they're making a contribution and actually do make a contribution to the world and help people and volunteer at charitable organizations in your church and civic clubs, and be active in even maybe starting a home business or doing part-time work here or there, a little less stressful to the body. Still, there has to be a way that each person can be doing the Lord's work in a significant way and not just goofing off and playing all day long because the world told them that's what you do when you're retired. Because a lot of senior citizens of not a few generations have been told you're supposed to go off to Florida or to Arizona and just bask in the sun and sit back and kick back and relax because you've earned it over these 30, 40 years of 50 years of working nonstop, and now is your time to take an endless vacation. That is total insanity, because that is not what the Lord calls us to do. He never said that there's a point in your life when you get older that you should stop doing meaningful, significant work. I mean, the Christian, we're supposed to be about the work of the kingdom of God, not self-centered, selfish me time all the time that a lot of seniors have been told that's what you're supposed to do. You've earned it. You know, you've given yourself to other people, the company, your children, your relatives, and now it's time for you, and take the next 10, 15, 20 years and just focus on you. That is not what the Bible tells us to do, and it's not healthy, and it's not God's will.
Arguments one by one. Because the first argument about raising the retirement age or privatizing Social Security or changing the Social Security system, this is considered the third rail of politics. And as I said in the show yesterday, Donald Trump hasn't touched it. He's the first Republican in a long time to have basically said the entitlements are off the table. We're not going to do anything about them. And I've said before, that's a smart political move. But smart political moves aren't necessarily good for the country. Both parties now argue that we can't touch Social Security. We can't touch Medicare. We can't touch Medicaid. The entitlement programs basically have to stay. The problem with that is that, of course, they're all going to go bankrupt. So politicians obviously have an incentive to keep kicking the can down the road and pretending that we have unlimited borrowing power and limited money to pay for a ballooning public debt.
Right. And we all know that the Social Security Administration is going broke. We all know that you can't sustain the system as it is. And so we definitely need to come together as a nation, take the best and brightest minds, and try to figure this problem out. Hopefully, with a solution that isn't cutting benefits for those who have paid into the system. I know, for example, myself, I have been paying into the system for many decades, and the Social Security system has already raised the retirement age on my generation at least once, because they raised it from the base of 65, which it had been for many, many decades. They raised it to basically 67. So they raised it 2 more years. So that's 2 years that I'm going to be receiving benefits less than I would have under the old 65-year-old system. Now, is that fair? Because I started paying in when it was telling me that I would be retiring or reach full retirement age at 65. I was paying in and told that just wait till you're 65, you can get your full retirement payments every month. Well, they changed the terms. Is that fair? Well, not really, because that's a renege on the commitment that the system made. So if they change it again, that will be the second time. If they raise it from 67 to say like 69 or 70, that will be a second change, a second reneging on the contract. And if they cut the benefits in the year 2033 or 34, that would be a third change that they would be instigating. And the system is going broke by the Social Security Administration's own words and estimates. So there definitely needs to be something done. And as a country and as leaders, we can do something about it, but we have to act. We can't just keep, like Ben Shapiro say, kicking the can down the road.
That, of course, is their incentive structure. But I'm not running for office, so I can tell you the truth, which is that if we don't raise the retirement age or privatize Social Security over time or make any changes to Social Security, we will go insolvent. Social Security is not, in fact, a lockbox. I saw a lot of tweets yesterday from people saying, I paid into Social Security. I'm just taking out what I got in. No, you're not. You absolutely are not. The government stole your money and paid it to somebody else. And now they're stealing somebody else's money and paying it to you. And I promise you that whatever you paid in is certainly not what you're getting out. You're either getting out way less. In my case, you're getting way less in Social Security, if ever you receive it, than you paid in. And in many cases, you're receiving far more. So my grandmother, for example, receiving Social Security, got way more than she paid in, because Social Security is not a defined, it is not a defined contributions plan. It's a defined benefits plan. And Social Security tells you how much you receive, but it has nothing to do with how much you put in. Social Security is a pyramid scheme. It is a Ponzi scheme. We are taking out trillions of dollars in debt to fund people retiring from work who are not somehow unable to work. That was the point that I'm making, is that many of the people that we are paying not to work right now, who are 65 years old, yes, they paid into the system, but that is because the system should not have taken their money in the first place. You should not have your money taken away from you by the federal government and then spent somewhere else. And then later, somebody else has to fill you in. You should be able to keep your own money. That's how you plan for retirement.
And then have the system tell you, oh, sorry, we don't have enough to pay you. So you're paying into a system. They're telling you it's going to be there. And then later on down, you learn, hey, it's not there. And it never was there because we already spent it. But we're not going to borrow and rack up more debt. And so you're going to have to take a cut in your retirement. So it's a bad system right now, and it needs to be reformed. And it might even just work out good for people to not retire at 65 like they've been told, because that may keep them healthier. It may give them more meaning and purpose. And it may actually be better overall for Americans that they don't retire when they were told to retire, because it's too early. I do agree. 65 is usually too early for most people.
And in fact, even the name Social Security is a euphemism, because originally what Social Security was an old age pension. That's what it was. And in fact, if you look at the history of Social Security, what you see, the history of retirement and Social Security, one of the things that you see is that it was an attempt to get older workers off the payrolls to make room for younger workers. The first kind of full Social Security scheme was put in place by Otto von Bismarck in Germany, and was a way of clearing the older payrolls of older workers because they weren't as effective. And in fact, older workers fought it. But in any case, when you look in America at the history of old age pensions, what you see is that in 1862, when the life expectancy was 39, there were some pensions that you could apply for if you were a Civil War veteran or if you were disabled, which again, makes some sense talking about people who are physically disabled. In 1890, when the life expectancy was 44, the law was amended to include disabled Civil War veterans who were disabled for any reason. In 1906, life expectancy 50, the law was amended to include old age. Now, why am I using life expectancy statistics? I'll get into that in a moment, because I've seen some community notes talking about the fact that if you make it to 50 or 60 and you're living in 1906, you're likely to live till 75 or 79 or whatever. That's the wrong statistic, and I'll explain why in a second. The Social Security Act was signed into law by FDR in 1935. Again, life expectancy at that time was 60. And it kicked in Social Security at 65. Okay? It created a federal safety net for the elderly, unemployed, disadvantaged Americans because of the Great Depression. And again, the main stipulation was to pay financial benefits to retirees over the age of 65 based on lifetime payroll tax contributions. But of course, the original contributions had never occurred. So the earliest Social Security recipients were not actually getting out what they'd paid in, because there was no Social Security tax. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First.
Okay, so what he's trying to say is the system does not apply today as it did before originally set up, because of life expectancy going up. Through the blessing of modern medicine and doctors, we are healthier and we're living longer. Therefore, the system needs to be reformed.
Now, let's get to where we are with Social Security now. The Social Security Trust Fund, which doesn't really exist. Again, all that money was paid out before. It's based on new taxes. That Social Security Trust Fund is set to empty in 2037, at which point taxes will be enough to pay for only 76% of scheduled benefits, at which time all the benefits are going to get slashed. Why is that happening? The answer is demographics. In 1960, approximately 5 workers covered the benefits of one retiree. So 5 workers paying into the system, that covered the benefits of one retiree. Today, 2 workers cover the benefits of one retiree. That is unsustainable. Our demographic pyramid is upside down in the United States. We have too many old people, and we don't have enough young workers, which means that the Ponzi scheme is collapsing. According to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, quote, the declining ratio of workers to beneficiaries creates financial difficulties for Social Security. In 1960, the Social Security program had revenues of $12 billion and outlays just shy of $12 billion. By 2021, the smaller ratio led to outlays of $1.1 trillion exceeding revenues of a little under $1.1 trillion. And that gap is going to continue to grow. By 2034, the last year before the funds are expected to become depleted, the Social Security's trustees expect that costs will exceed income by $437 billion. And when those trust funds are depleted, benefits will then be limited by the income assigned to the program. And absent changes to the law, benefits will be reduced by 20%. So again, why is this happening? 2 demographic factors. 1, people did not have enough kids. You can support this pyramid scheme so long as there are enough young people who are there to work to support the elderly as filtered through government programs. But there aren't. People are having fewer babies. 2, people are in fact living longer. Around 1960, that was the end of the baby boom. The average number of children born to a woman was 3.6. Today, that number is 1.6, which is not replacement level. In 1960, if you reached 65, if you reached retirement age, you're expected to live to about 80. Today, you're expected to live to about 85. Again, according to Cato Institute, the cost of Social Security to the American taxpayer, excluding disability, in 2022 was over $1 trillion. By 2033, that's going to be $2 trillion a year, well over $2.1 trillion a year.
So
In
basically,
that year, borrowing authority.
basically what he's saying is that the system itself is going to be breaking down in the future. Now, we can cry about that. We can get all anxious and discouraged, or we can see that as an opportunity. We can see that as an opportunity to change and to modify our thinking and to begin to think in different terms than past generations have been thinking. And we need to stop thinking of there's a set age where everybody has to retire at 65 or 67, or if they raise it up to 70. I think the mindset should be, as a Christian, that we should stay active. We should not think in terms of quitting and separating ourselves from all meaningful, purposeful, productive activity, and think in terms of, if our health gets to the point where we can't earn a living or even work part-time, and if we can't do these things, then we should try to be productive in our own way, from our homes, working around the home, trying to stay active, but not buy into this idea that you need to take this endless vacation kind of lifestyle and goof off all the time and spend your time eating out 5 or 6 times a week, going to restaurants, traveling all over the place, and basically playing the whole day away because we've been told that we've earned it because you've been serving others for 40 years. Now it's time to serve yourself. No, that is not a Christian attitude. If we stop full-time employment, or if we have to, because of health reasons or whatever, stop part-time employment, then we should look in terms of, how can I be useful to the Lord in other ways? How can I serve the kingdom of God? How can I advance the Christian cause? How can I be in the will of God and not just be a selfish person who's just spending all their time and their money and their resources on yourself? And get out there and help people and be useful to the kingdom of God, whether through church or through helping the family out. You know, a lot of senior citizens do a lot of work with the grandkids and help the parents out by tending to the kids certain times of the day, and being useful, being active, engaging with the world, and not just running around thinking that you have to spend all your money and you have to have all the things you couldn't have done before and now and make it all about you. We need to think differently on that and really come at this from a genuine Christian point of view. And that's, I think, what we need to do. We'll talk to you tomorrow or next week, and we'll see you later. Bye.